Have you ever had the perfect thing to say come to mind just after a conversation ended? Ever thought, I wish I would have said this or that differently? You're not alone. One Last Word podcast is an outlet for every wish I would have said, hadn't thought of that before moment. Every Monday, pastors from Living Hope Church will engage with the recent Sunday morning conversation and drill down a little deeper. Catch a short snapshot of the message and hear something new and unexpected. One Last Word provides the opportunity to not let those challenging ideas and deeper thoughts go left unchecked. Join us as we get in One Last Word.
Well, hello there, fellow wanderers and ponderers. Welcome back again to a new episode of One Last Word. Here we are, Monday morning, sitting in my office on this rainy day in Ohio. I'm Pastor John, one of the pastors here at Living Hope Church, and so glad that you found the time to find your way here to One Last Word. Maybe you found us on social media, facebook.com/elivinghope. We post them there. You found us on the interwebs at elivinghope.com, all kinds of information. Maybe you found us via a podcast share or a friend telling you to join in the conversation. However you found your way here, we're grateful. I'm grateful to spend a little time with you here on Monday morning. The purpose of One Last Word is just as its name suggests. It's an opportunity for the pastors of Living Hope to just get in one last word following our conversation from Sunday. Oftentimes as a pastor, I sit in my office on Monday mornings just like today. And I think, man, I wish I'd have said this, or I wish I'd have said that, or I wish I'd have had time to cover this or that. And so just an outlet for us to continue the conversation. It's such an important word. I say it a lot as a pastor here at Living Hope. It's important to us. We believe conversation is really the pathway to deeper growth and maturity and faith. And in our world, I believe learning to live and be the people that God has created us to be whole as humans in the world, flourishing humans, it requires conversation. It requires the ability to hear other people and hear other points of view and listen and engage with things that line up with our beliefs and things that oppose our beliefs, and all in a place where we can grow and learn together. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to engage with that here today on One Last Word as we continue the conversation about our Lenten season. We just covered Palm Sunday this past week together and talked about this image, really this culmination moment where Jesus spends his time on the earth and he turns towards the cross. He turns towards Jerusalem. And Palm Sunday is this moment when he enters the city, this triumphal entry. And he was greeted with throngs of people celebrating the Messiah has come. And we shared a little bit about this Sunday. I'm going to play it for you in a second just to re-engage you with what we talked about on Sunday. But this story of people celebrating who they dreamed that the Messiah would be. And all the time, we are coming into contact with this reality that we have hopes and dreams. We have expectations for who God is and how he was going to work in our world and how things are going to play out in our world, how things are going to play out in our lives if we're in relationship with him. And those expectations and dreams constantly come up against the reality of who God actually is. And in that messy, complicated deal, I believe there is truth to be found that will lead us to greater places of wholeness. So I want to continue that conversation. I think it's really important, and we're going to kind of dive in, drill down to maybe some practical help as an extension of what we talked about on Sunday that we didn't have time for. But first I want to play a little clip from our Sunday morning conversation to re-engage with you. Maybe you listened to it, you were here on Sunday. This will kind of reconnect you with what we talked about. Maybe you missed it altogether, which is totally fine. You can find us, facebook.com/elivinghope. You can find all our stream messages there. You can also find us on YouTube. Search for eLiving Hope, and you can find our logo and our stream messages there. We also have a new resource coming up, and you can actually find this on YouTube already. It's called Church Everywhere. You can find stream videos there as well. We're looking forward to launching more resources in the coming future, as we launch Church Everywhere completely. A little plug and tease about that upcoming resource. But without more delay, why don't we dive in? Here's the conversation, just a little snippet, a minute or two of our conversation from Sunday as we engage with this idea. What happens when our expectations and dreams encounter the truth of who Christ is in our lives and who he means for us to see him as? Let's listen to this.
And then we have the people of Israel entering into the same equation with their beliefs about what God would look like and how God would function in their world. Their picture of Jesus was, and the reason that Jesus, not a week later, would find himself hanging on a cross is because their expectations of who Messiah was didn't match up with actually who he was. But in the people of Israel, we also have this other part of this perfect storm. We have Rome moving in, and we have the expectations of Israel for Yahweh, that he would establish them as a people. He would establish them as powerful and as prized and blessed over other people. Sound familiar, maybe? That we like our places of status. We like to be the ones who are right. We look out across the histories of humanity and said, well, or maybe someday in heaven, all of us, Christian people will stand up and say, see, we all were right? We're all in heaven and you all are not. We like this reality where we have like blessing, right? Because we have all the answers. We have a prized position. And yet their heart of selfishness, their heart of this reality that they were going to be the ones who God would bless instead of others, was another force that was moving in opposition to the realities of who the Messiah really was. And then we have this third element in this perfect storm in the scriptures, where Jesus rides into Jerusalem on a donkey. And to me, as I kind of touch back from that other story, Jesus is this hurricane, this disruptive, gigantic, powerful force moving in an unexpected way that nobody saw coming. And here's Jesus moving and disrupting everything around him. N.T. Wright says it like this, and he often says things better than I could ever dream. And it's on the screen here today. N.T. Wright is a wonderful theologian, really smart guy. And he says it like this: do not be surprised if in this process there are moments when it feels as though you are being sucked down to the depths 500 miles from shore amidst 100-foot waves, weeping for the dream that has to die, for the kingdom that isn't coming the way you wanted. That's what it's like when you are caught up in Jesus' perfect storm. The people of Israel standing that day, celebrating all their dreams and expectations of who Jesus was, and yet here he rides in, weeping before them on a donkey, not a white war horse, but on a donkey of all things, surrender and sacrifice, and showing them a way that is completely in opposition of all of their hopes and dreams. What do we do with that picture?
What do we do with that picture? I've been wrestling out of the outflow of our talk on Sunday, just with that simple question: what do I do with that picture? What do I do with my expectations that I have of God, my dreams that I have of God? And when he doesn't fulfill those expectations or dreams, or he appears to me or reveals himself as something altogether different than what I thought he should look like. And in my experience in my own life, when my expectations are unmet in relation to what I perceive God should do or should be, it really causes trauma in my relationship with him. It causes seasons of doubt, of questioning. It causes seasons of wondering if this God that I placed my trust in is really a God that can be trusted. And I think all of us honestly have questions about that when our expectations go unmet. And the people of Israel are a perfect example of how humans respond when God doesn't show up or reveal himself to be the God they thought him to be. For the Israelites in this story, they were celebrating Yahweh has come to set us free. Their expectation was that Yahweh would remove their oppression from the thumb of the first part of the perfect storm. You can go back and listen to that, of Rome. And they wanted to be set free and liberated, and they wanted to be reestablished as the people of blessing, the chosen people of God. And yet God had an altogether different sort of rescue in mind. that had really nothing to do with Rome. It had everything to do with the oppression of evil upon all of humanity, and yet they missed it. He said in the passage of Scripture we read on Sunday, he was weeping because they missed the peace that they so desperately desired. They missed it. It was right in front of them. And I wonder how often I miss what God might have for me because I'm disappointed that he's not who I thought he would be. I wonder if the same is true in your own life. And it brings us to this place of how do we then lay down our expectations? Because laying down our dreams and expectations and hopes of who God might be is difficult. It's hard. And it seems almost counterintuitive because it's so much a part of our yearning as broken humans. We have stuff that we want God to fix, don't we? And the promise and the allure of walking into a relationship with God is that we might find resolution to those problems. And I believe Jesus offers them to us just in ways that we might miss. And I think it's a tool of the enemy or evil, the pursuer of destruction in our world and our lives, however we would personify him or name him. It is the motivation of sin and death to distract us from the things that would bring us life, even bottling them up in the falsehood that our dreams and beliefs and hopes and expectations are being let down. And in the midst of that sorrow of losing what we'd hoped for, we miss something even better. And so how do we move into that place? And what does it look like to lay down our dreams and expectations of God? And what does God promise us in return? And I've been thinking through, like, what does that look like? And how do we engage in this activity, especially as we move now through Holy Week, this intense time of preparation as we follow the footsteps of Jesus. He in a very real way experienced what we experience as humans. And we're going to go to a little section of Scripture I want to read to you that I think zeroes in on the reality that Jesus had hopes and expectations as well, but shows us a different way forward. And we go to the Gospel of Luke again. We were there on Sunday, but just fast forward ahead a little bit into chapter 22. Starting at verse 39, this is a scene where Jesus is moving to this moment of being arrested, and it's right before, and he's praying at the Mount of Olives, and he's just overcome with grief and sorrow and pain and suffering. We find Jesus at another vulnerable moment. He stood before Jerusalem, and we found him weeping, and now he stands at the Mount of Olives. His disciples a stone throw away from him, but sleeping, and we find him again weeping before the Father. It says this: Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives. This is something he often did, engaging with the disciples and praying, talking to the Father. And his disciples followed him, and on reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation," or the testing. Another conversation for another day. In verse 31, he withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them and knelt down and he prayed. And that word prayed, he intimately had conversation with his Father. He said, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me." And in that moment, I see Jesus bearing the weight of the reality of what's coming. He knows that his horrific death is looming, this pathway to wholeness and healing for the entire human race, and yet it posed a traumatic encounter for Jesus himself. And in his humanity, I believe he felt everything that we feel when we encounter the weight of oppressive, traumatic moments of violence upon our lives. Emotional violence, physical violence, spiritual violence upon our lives. And Jesus, as a human, faced this reality. He was where you are. And he had his own hopes and dreams that maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have to go through with this. Maybe, just maybe, humanity would respond to him in a way that wouldn't require him going to the cross. I don't know what was going through Jesus' mind, but I know in this plea, "Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me," we can see within it the humanity of Christ. That he's just where you and I often sit. Hopes and dreams that we wouldn't have to go through trauma and pain anymore, that the oppression of our lives might be relieved, that our problems might find answers, and that God might hold the key to those answers and solutions. And yet Jesus shows us, I think, something very important, because many of us stop here. "Father, if you're willing, take all this pain away," and then we stop and wait for God to fulfill all of our expectations. And then yet Jesus shows us something different, as he often does. Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me, yet not what I want, Lord, but what you want be done. Not what I will, but yours be done. Powerful words that show us a pathway forward. Because when we often stop as humans with our expectations and dreams, they become ultimatums. And we don't see them as such, but think about it. When we declare our expectations out in the open or deep within our hearts, Lord, this is what I need you to do in my life. I need you to fix this, heal this, show up and do your thing with this situation or circumstance. And yet when he doesn't act as we hope he would, then what's the outflow of that? And if it's anything but trust and deeper relationship, then our expectations and dreams were in fact ultimatums that are keeping us from seeing the best that God has for us. And that's hard for us to believe and imagine. And it's not that God allows brokenness. Again, a conversation for a whole nother day. But brokenness happens in our lives. Brokenness and traumatic experience happened to Jesus. The Father didn't cause it. It was a product of what was going on in life because of the brokenness of the world. And it required an answer, required a solution that required sacrifice and surrender. And that a part of that sacrifice and surrender was hard for Christ. And he saw that and knew it and felt the weight of it. And yet he placed his trust in the Father to work good in the midst of great suffering. And I think within that we see a few things I want to draw our hearts and minds to. The first, we see authenticity in relationship. Jesus he didn't hold back. And I think this is an important point for us, that the answer to moving forward with what God has for us and seeing who he really is rather than our expectations of him is not to share our hopes and dreams and expectations with God, but it's learning to share those in a way where they're not ultimatums, but they're moments of authenticity. Talk to God about your expectations and your dreams and your hopes and your longings. God desires to know your heart for the purpose of relationship. And in Jesus, I believe we see a deep authenticity that was not shrouded in ultimatum. It was not shrouded in ulterior motives, but it was purely and simply an expression of deep relationship with the Father. So we begin this journey towards seeing who Jesus really is, seeing who God really is through who Jesus reveals himself to be for us by being authentic in relationship. Share your hopes and dreams. We did that a little bit on Sunday on purpose. You can go back and watch, and several people courageously shared their hopes and dreams, and that's such an important part. Write them down, journal them, talk to God, tell others what your hopes and dreams are that God would show up and do in your relationship, and then move beyond your hopes and dreams and learn to trust. And authenticity builds trust. As we're authentically sharing who we are, Christ will respond and authentically reveal who God is through reflection of his life, and we build trust. And trust invites us, as Jesus did, not my will, but yours be done. Trust invites us to lay down our hopes and dreams because we're holding on to the belief that God has something better for us than we can imagine. I'm laying down my hopes and dreams because I've come to believe and trust that you, God, are leading me somewhere better than what I can see. And however hard that is to believe, trust brings us to a place. And this is a practiced activity. We authentically share our hopes and dreams and expectations, and then we lay them down and surrender them before God. God, take this cup from me, but not my will, yours be done. God, take these oppressive forces from me, but not my will, yours be done. It's a beautiful rhythm that Jesus shows us. And the third most important part about this kind of equation is what we talked about in that repeating. It's time in relationship. See, many of us make this mistake that we believe that just trust magically happens. We snap our fingers. And I don't know why we're confused sometimes in our relationship with God, because we know in our normal relationships with others and with people, family members, kids, that trust is something that's built, and that's not surprising. And yet somehow we enter into this relationship with God, and we think that trust just happens in an hour on Sunday, and God does what we need him to do or want him to do, and poof, we have trust. And yet God invites us into this ongoing eternal relationship with Him, where we're authentically revealing who we are as He authentically reveals who He is through Christ. We establish trust in relationship as we surrender our expectations and dreams, and as God continually shows up over and over and reveals to us what we couldn't see before, what we couldn't imagine before. Over and over again, we repeat, authenticity leads to trust. Authenticity leads to trust. And we build this beautiful relationship where we, like Christ, could face the worst that the world would throw at us. That you could face the worst that the world could throw at you. As long as you enter into a relationship of authenticity and trust with the Father, that you, like Jesus, could kneel before God, say, God, here's my hopes and dreams, but not my will, yours be done. Help me to see with your eyes. That's my one last word for today. It's challenging me in my walk with God as I lay down my hopes and dreams and expectations and learn to trust that He can see sometimes things that I can't, and learn to lean into having eyes to see the hope and wholeness and healing and flourishing that He has in store for my life and for yours. Thanks so much for joining again on One Last Word today. I want to invite you to take a moment now, right now, just click subscribe, and then go and, if you would do me a great favor, go and share the feed. Share it on our social media, on Instagram, on Facebook. It just helps us engage with others with the hope of Christ. That's our mission and purpose as the people of God, people of Jesus, resurrection people. Looking forward to Easter. We have some exciting things coming for Living Hope. Baptisms coming up on Sunday. What better day to celebrate new life in the lives of others than Easter Sunday? Come and join us. We have 3 different services. We have a special sunrise service that's happening on Sunday morning, 6:50 out in the parking lot at church. We'll be outside, so wear a coat. And then we have our normal English service at 10 o'clock on Easter Sunday here at Living Hope. And then we are starting this coming Sunday, 11:30, an English Swahili service in our main sanctuary as well. Just excited for what God is doing. Again, thanks so much for joining, giving some time to conversation on this Monday morning. I trust that you met with the Lord today. You were led closer to Jesus today. And I invite you, I challenge you to lean in, share your hopes and dreams with God, and then lay them down at His feet and say, Lord, not my will, but yours be done. I believe we will see the greater things that God has in store for us, just as He has proven all throughout human history that God is always bringing us to a place of wholeness and flourishing. Thanks again for joining us today on One Last Word. Grace and peace.
Thanks for listening to One Last Word. Make sure you subscribe and share today. Find more resources at elivinghope.com.